Shifting focus from France to the United Kingdom, where there is no hung parliament. It is a massive Labour Party surge coming to victory after 14 years of Conservative rule, the biggest mandate that a Labour government has got in an entire generation. Keir Starmer, the man credited with Labour's revival, who led the party to its first victory since 2005, is the new Prime Minister of Britain. He's ousted Rishi Sunak, who took the reins after a bitter power struggle in the Conservative Party. But with Labour back at the helm of Britain, how does this impact India's ties with Britain? Joining us now on the broadcast is Manoj Ladva. He's the founder of the India Global Forum, which is the annual meeting of think tanks and strategic policy experts in London every year. Thank you very much, Mr. Ladva. First things first, it's a major win for the Labour Party, perhaps the biggest that they've seen since 1997 and Tony Blair and New Labour. What would you attribute such a massive mandate to by Keir Starmer and the Labour Party?
Thank you very much, Saka, for having me on your show. Look, it's a remarkable victory, as you've said, and something that was expected in many ways, but perhaps the size of the victory was a little in doubt. A number of factors, but essentially, I think after 14 years of Conservative rule, there was some fatigue within the British public as to the Conservative Party. And so you saw this as more of a rejection of the Conservative Party rather than anything else.
I do want to ask you in the context of India-UK ties, obviously a lot of the focus is going to be on the free trade agreement. It was supposed to have been clinched a couple of Diwalis ago, but that has not been the case. With a new Labour government in place, how do you see these negotiations progressing?
Yes, a good question, and something that has been on the minds of many people over the last few months. If you have a look at the Labour Party manifesto, it puts the FTA with India as a matter of priority between the UK and India, and something that the Labour Party is keen to pursue. Just a couple of weeks ago, the then Shadow Foreign Secretary and now Foreign Secretary of the UK, David Lammy, at India Global Forum in London, said very categorically that the FTA is something that he sees as a major priority for an incoming Labour government, and he and his colleagues will be pursuing that in all earnest. So I think all the right noises are being made. The question now is that how quickly can they get down to the negotiating table and start dealing with the tricky issues that still remain on the FTA.
One of the issues that we've seen having great resonance even on the campaign was immigration. It was a big talking point, and as far as India is concerned, either as part of the FTA or outside of it, India wants to try and include some kind of temporary work visas for Indian nationals, particularly in the high-tech sectors, to be able to work in the UK. With Labour now in power, Labour government in power, do you see that being sort of under a cloud, if you will?
No, I don't see it as under a cloud. I think both the UK and India have to recognize each other's various positions and constraints. As far as the UK is concerned, there is a sentiment, not only in the UK, but across Europe, of an anti-immigration sentiment that's prevailing. And so there is some degree of political pullback on allowing immigration to flow in the way in which it would have done maybe 5 or 10 years ago. So to that extent, there needs to be a recognition of political realities in the UK. Having said that, the UK does have various shortages of skilled occupations where India is abundantly well positioned to fill, and Indians are well positioned to fill, especially in the very highly skilled areas. So there is room for negotiation, there's room for maneuver, and there's room for opportunity between the two countries.
In the past, whenever we've had Labour governments, and even when Labour was not in government, when it was in opposition, there have been some tricky ties for India-UK ties, particularly on the question of Kashmir, on the question of the whole Khalistan issue and sort of soft separatism, if you will. I think when Jeremy Corbyn was the former leader of the Labour Party, he said something which was not particularly well taken here in India. How much should India be concerned about these sort of radical elements within Labour pushing the party, pushing the centre of the party in directions which would not be pleasing to India?
Well, it certainly is an issue, but having said that, what we've seen so far from Keir Starmer and the senior leadership of the Labour Party is that they want to focus very much on the wider strategic relationship with India and the economic relationship, and seem to be quite keen to ensure that these sorts of issues don't derail the relationship with India.
Mr. Ladwa, I also want to get a word in about what's happened overnight across the channel in France. A big win by the left-wing coalition, the New Popular Front as it's known. Unexpected because no one quite predicted this. Many were saying that the far-right party, National Rally of Marine Le Pen, would win. What do you make of what's happening in Europe? You have a Labour government in Britain now. You have most likely a left-wing plus centrist coalition that will likely take power in France. At a time when we were seeing strong men around Europe, even in America, do you see this sort of coming back of left-wing forces as sort of a change of the political cycle?
I think, look, there is mixed messages coming across. You have given the post-COVID scenario across the world that has disrupted global supply chains, and these economies are very much probably the most globally integrated economies anywhere in the world. This region certainly is. And secondly, you're seeing a huge impact because of the war in Ukraine as well, that has had an impact on oil prices, energy prices, and also huge concerns over security as well. So all of these factors are creating, I think, a significant amount of flux in this region, and therefore you're seeing big swings, as you see here in the UK, and surprise results in Europe as well. So it's a very difficult scenario to read, and I think the pollsters seem to be all over the place at the moment.
I want to talk to you, since you mentioned the Russia-Ukraine war and how that's having a knock-on effect, particularly on the cost of living crisis across Europe. Prime Minister Modi is in Moscow. He's there today and tomorrow. He's meeting with President Putin. What is the view from London and Europe about what is seemingly a very different, nuanced position that India seems to have taken vis-a-vis Russia and this war? Is it something that, the folks in the West, friends and partners of India, understand, or is it something that they still are unhappy about?
Yeah, clearly the West started off quite disappointed with India's position, but I think that's been replaced with reality about India's relationship with Russia, India's position in the region and in the world, and to recognize that whilst the West may not agree with India's position, the reality is that India has taken its own stand, and that's in many ways being respected as well. It's also, I think, important to point out that there are various capitals in Europe that see in Prime Minister Modi as a potential go-between or a potential support to try and end the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, because he is by far the most respected global democratically elected leader, given his experience over so many years on the international stage. And so a lot of eyes will be on the meeting with President Putin and Prime Minister Modi. And Prime Minister Modi has been on record, and he's repeated the fact that he believes that this is not an era for war, and that speaks volumes. And hopefully there'll be some degree of bearing on that as well in these discussions.
Mr. Manoj Ladwa, the founder of the India Global Forum, thank you very much for joining us and putting all of that into perspective. It's a very interesting time, certainly in Europe, and the view about an emerging India, a rising India from Europe is also undergoing some degree of nuance. Of course, the Prime Minister is in Moscow and will be tracking that diplomatic visit, an important one, the first time that the Prime Minister has traveled to Moscow, to Russia, since this war between Russia and Ukraine broke out. We will have that covered right here on CNN News 18. Our Anand Narasimhan will be covering that for us today and tomorrow. Thank you.